Bonjour à tous les camarades présents aujourd'hui à Lausanne.
Hello to all the comrades present today in Lausanne. My name is Pascal Lottaz. I am an associate professor for neutrality studies in Kyoto, Japan, and I am one of the initiators of the call from left-wing and green supporters for the Neutrality Initiative. I cannot be with you today, but I send you my sincere greetings and thanks for organizing this important conference. Although I am a member of the Social Democratic Party, I am truly very grateful to all the communists and other left-wing comrades who see the signs of the times and want to support genuine Swiss neutrality.
Veut soutenir une véritable neutralité suisse. La lutte pour l'initiative sur la neutralité.
The struggle for the initiative on neutrality will be difficult, but probably one of the most important of our time, as it could very well determine whether in a few years our daughters and sons will die in foreign wars, or if we will stay at home. Let us refuse the wars of European powers that have been exercising mass violence around us for centuries. This is a decision with as great a scope as that of the fateful days of 1815, when our great compatriot from Geneva, Charles Pictet de Rochemont, successfully fought for our neutrality in Vienna.
The
direction that global politics is taking at the moment is terrible, and the fact that our elites in Bern are trying to involve us in NATO's warmongering through indirect means is even more frightening. The level of hypocrisy and unfair propaganda with which the current leaders of the Federal Council and our two chambers of Parliament operate is breathtaking. However, not all is lost, as we still have our precious direct democracy. And we will bring this issue to the people to ask them to support our vision of a peaceful and non-threatening Switzerland. As the ancient Thucydides said, to be truly neutral, Switzerland must strive to be a friend to all and an enemy to none.
L'ami de tous et l'ennemi de personne. Pour y parvenir, nous devons avoir une neutralité crédible, mais aussi...
To achieve this, we must have a neutrality that is credible, but also friendly, a neutrality that seeks to make friends. We cannot achieve this by imposing sanctions on only one party, or by integrating our defense system into that of a hostile and aggressive military alliance like NATO. That is the path to ruin and rupture. We must restore the original neutrality of Switzerland, which was well defined and recognized as being in Europe's interest in the treaties of Vienna. But allow me to put on my academic hat and tell you where we stand today in our national debate on neutrality. Because things are complicated, as they often are.
Car les choses sont compliquées, comme ils sont souvent. En apparence, il semble que la Suisse reste fidèle à sa neutralité.
On the surface, it seems that Switzerland remains committed to its neutrality. Annual surveys show that an overwhelming majority of 91% of our compatriots are in favor of maintaining neutrality. However, these same surveys also indicate that there are significant differences in views on what this neutrality should or should not be. Regarding military cooperation with NATO, 52% of respondents believe that Switzerland should cooperate more closely with the alliance. 30% of respondents even agree with the statement that Switzerland should join NATO. This means that at least 21% of compatriots do not consider NATO and neutrality to be incompatible.
Ne considèrent pas l'OTAN et la neutralité comme incompatibles. Surprenant, n'est-ce pas? En outre, il existe également d'importantes...
Surprising, isn't it? Moreover, there are also significant differences within the population. Generally speaking, young people are less inclined to view NATO or cooperation with it favorably, while respondents with a higher level of education are more likely to support cooperation and even membership in this alliance. But other political forces are also pushing and pulling this debate in various directions. For example, a recent study by Eduard and Effler shows that elites from neutral and non-aligned countries tend to view NATO and transatlantic integration in general much more favorably than opinion polls suggest.
Les auteurs constatent que les préférences atlanticistes.
The authors note that Atlanticist preferences are not only widely shared by political elites, but also systematically concealed from the public in militarily neutral European countries. Additionally, elites frequently avoid publicly expressing these preferences due to the population's deep attachment to their country's policy of military neutrality or non-alignment. Although this study only focuses on Sweden, Austria, and Serbia, it is not an exaggeration to infer that in Switzerland as well, political leaders in the federal administration might view NATO more favorably than the broader European public. After all, the Federal Council has never hidden its preferences.
Après tout, le Conseil fédéral n'a jamais caché ses préférences. Au cours des 3 dernières années, il a publié 4 livres blancs.
Over the past 3 years, he has published 4 white papers, or studies, in which he has embraced the idea of increased cooperation with NATO and the EU on security at a level never before reached in Swiss history. The 2022 report states that this is why it, that is, Switzerland, has long been striving to have both options in the event of armed aggression, namely to defend itself autonomously or to organize its defense with other states. To improve military interoperability and thus increase Switzerland's freedom of action, the army must prepare for international cooperation. To do this, cooperation opportunities must be used to enhance defense capability while remaining neutral.
Défense, tout en restant neutre. Au moins ça. Le rapport 2024 recommande même l'interopérabilité.
The 2024 report even recommends the interoperability of Swiss military systems with NATO standards through gradual participation in the NATO certification process. It is suggested that, if necessary, NATO could verify and certify the interoperability and military capabilities of certain Swiss army formations. This means that Switzerland not only aims to be compatible with NATO, but is already ensuring that NATO itself certifies its interoperability. Furthermore, the report suggests that Switzerland participate in NATO's Federated Mission Networking project, which aims to integrate the command and communication systems of armed forces into a single multinational command system to create comprehensive technical command capability.
Afin de créer une capacité de conduite intégrale sur le plan technique. Et parce que le FMN sert des pierres angulaires.
And because the FMN serves as a cornerstone for all cooperation with NATO, hence the necessity of Swiss participation. There is no doubt that the vision of this Federal Council report is the transformation of the Swiss armed forces into an operational part of NATO's overall military capability. This cooperation would allow it, if necessary, to integrate its own systems into NATO's command and communication systems from the start of an operation or joint exercise, whether in the context of defense or military peace promotion. NATO refers to Day Zero connectivity, a capability that Switzerland must have if needed.
La Suisse doit disposer en cas de nécessité. For
me, this approach amounts to an operational abandonment of neutrality. But the Federal Council claims it is merely preparing for the most pessimistic scenario of an armed attack against Switzerland. In that case, the legal requirements of neutrality law would cease anyway, and the country could defend itself collectively. In other words, the Federal Council prefers to lay the groundwork for collective self-defense, but only if the need arises. The fourth and most recent report from the Study Commission, appointed by the Ministry of Defense, also concluded that cooperation with NATO and the EU must go beyond the current cooperation.
Doit dépasser la coopération actuelle, la coopération devrait évoluer en direction d'une défense commune.
Cooperation should evolve towards a common defense. Furthermore, concrete efforts have been made over the past 2 years to follow up on these political directions. Notably, high-level meetings between military representatives of Switzerland and NATO, an agreement on opening a NATO liaison office in Geneva, a memorandum of understanding on Switzerland's accession to the EU's Sky Shield initiative, and, more visibly, Ms. Amherd's participation in a meeting of the North Atlantic Council, which is NATO's political body, marking a first in Switzerland's history.
Ce qui constitue une première dans l'histoire de la Suisse. Cependant, si le rapprochement politique et militaire.
However, while the political and military rapprochement between Switzerland and NATO is evident and manifest, other forces within the country's political process are simultaneously working to change this direction. Not only did the Federal Council itself publish a report on neutrality policy in October 2022, concluding that the principles announced in 1993 are still valid and form the basis of these decisions, but in the summer of 2024, the National Council also adopted a motion prohibiting Switzerland's participation in NATO missions that practice collective self-defense under Article 5 of the NATO Charter. National Councillor Fabian Molina from the Socialist Party justifies the motion as follows.
PS, Fabian Molina justifie la motion comme suite. Il est dans l'intérêt de la Suisse que notre pays renforce.
It is in Switzerland's interest for our country to strengthen its collaboration with NATO on a case-by-case basis. At the same time, the Commission recognises the need to clarify the implications for respecting Switzerland's neutrality and freedom of alliance. Neutrality and freedom of alliance remain relevant and will continue to be important and useful instruments of Swiss security and foreign policy, even in these troubled times. The success of the motion in the National Council was made possible by a political realignment of NATO-sceptical factions among left and right parties. However, it did not convince the Council of States, which rejected it by 29 votes to 12 with 4 abstentions.
Rejeté par 29 voix contre 12 et 4 abstentions. La motion va maintenant faire l'objet d'une nouvelle délibération.
The motion will now be subject to further deliberation in the lower house. The debate in the Council of States shows that there is no consensus among parliamentarians on the question of what level of cooperation with NATO is compatible or not with Switzerland's neutrality. This trend is also visible at other levels of society, particularly with this initiative for a national referendum on neutrality. If adopted, the neutrality initiative that we all support would clearly enshrine the definition of our neutrality in the Constitution, where it is currently only mentioned without being specified.
Où elle est actuellement seulement mentionnée sans être précisée. Elle serait définie comme perpétuelle, armée, sans alliance.
It would be defined as perpetual, armed, without alliances, and for the first time in constitutional neutrality, it would include the duty of the state to remain economically neutral by avoiding imposing sanctions on the warring parties. If the idea initially gained popularity thanks to the support of Christoph Blocher, the Citizen Committee that drafted the concrete text of the initiative is not affiliated with any party and includes both left-wing and right-wing activists. During the 18 months allocated for collecting signatures, our committee, composed of academics, trade unionists, and politicians from left-wing and Green parties, formed a support group to show that, even among us, there are many voices that support this initiative, although the official Social Democratic Party is not in favour of this redefinition.
Officiel ne soit pas favorable à cette redéfinition. C'est pourquoi je suis si reconnaissante à vous.
That is why I am so grateful to you, the communists, for fighting for true Swiss neutrality. In conclusion, I would like to tell you that all this means our fight for a correct definition of Swiss neutrality is neither a lost cause nor a settled matter. What we need to do is to explain again and again to our fellow citizens why this initiative and the proposed text for our constitution are not harmful in any way, but a necessary reaffirmation of a useful and constructive Swiss neutrality. I haven't had the time to discuss all our left-wing arguments in favour of this initiative, but I am sure my colleague Professor Wolf Linder and the other speakers will do so.
Mon collègue, le professeur Wolf Linder, et les autres orateurs le feront. Je vous invite également à prendre connaissance de nos arguments en ligne et à...
I also invite you to review our arguments online and contact me personally to discuss further. We must succeed in convincing our fellow citizens that although we are not a pro-Putin initiative, it makes perfect sense for us to maintain good relations with the entire world, and that we should contribute to de-escalating conflicts rather than supporting a party that wants to resolve them through war. Dear comrades, I wish you strength, wisdom, and well.
Je vous souhaite force, sagesse et paix.